Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Lessons from the Pandemic, How Today's Trends Create Tomorrow's Success. My name is Brendan. I'm with marketing for BizBuySell. It's currently 11 o'clock here on the West Coast and 2 o'clock back east. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us. While many of us are at home more than ever, every day brings some degree of change, from the "oh, okay" to the "oh, wow, okay." We feel that too, and know that small business owners, buyers, and sellers in our professional community have more questions and need more answers than almost anyone. With this in mind, and finally enough time passing and data collected, we wanted to bring to you what we've seen, learned, and believe. Being able to do this with our partner Guidant and bring our related pieces of the small business puzzle together to offer you a more comprehensive perspective on place makes it feel all the more worthwhile. For our presenters today, we have Bob House. Bob, who's been the Director of Product Management, General Manager, and now President for the past 8 years with BizBuySell.com and BizQuest.com, the internet's largest and most heavily trafficked business for sale marketplaces. Prior to this, Bob had an impressive career with Dun & Bradstreet and companies involved in tech and travel in the greater San Francisco area. Also with us today will be David Nilssen. David launched Guidant out of Seattle in 2003 and has helped over 20,000 individuals secure nearly $5 billion in funding to start or buy a business across all 50 states. Guidant's typical client is a franchisee or individually owned Main Street American small business. In 2007, the Small Business Administration named David the top young entrepreneur in the country. Everything David invests his time in is related to entrepreneurship. Today, he serves the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a network serving 14,000 entrepreneurs in nearly every country, as the Global Learning Chair, ensuring they continue to evolve and thrive as business people. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Bob. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Brendan. I hope everyone can hear me. I want to thank everyone for taking some time to join us today. I wanted to give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. As Brendan mentioned, the two speakers, I'll start off and then I'll pass it to David. And I'm going to cover a market overview, some of the great opportunity that's in the marketplace right now based on the data that we see, and what some thriving businesses that are benefiting from these times. David's then going to segue with more in depth on those industries and then those with upside. He's going to then cover how to select, value, and finance your business, and cover more information around how the pandemic is impacting things. So with that, and we'll get to your questions at the end, of course, so please enter those into the question box as Brendan mentioned. And so with that, I wanted to set up the market overview piece. BizBuySell is in a unique position, being the largest marketplace for buying and selling businesses, where we have access to a lot of data on what's really going on in the industry. And so I'm going to be relying on two data sets in covering this information. The first is our Insight Report, which we've been doing since 2007. And so we have a long history of tracking trends in the industry as reported by participating business brokers on our platform. The second data set is we did a survey in early July of over 3,000 business owners and buyers, and we asked them how the pandemic is affecting them and their decisions around buying and selling businesses. So with that, what's been happening in the market? Well, sales of businesses have been at historic highs, and driven by really a strong economy, retiring baby boomers, and ready access to available capital. Then we hit this wall and hit a bottom in April with a 51% drop in reported transactions. So what happened? Well, according to our survey of owners, over half of those owners indicated that they were forced to at least partially suspend, if not outright close their businesses. With that, basically deals got delayed. This is a survey from the IBBA and M&A source of business intermediaries, and over nearly half of deals were delayed, caused by uncertainty, causing buyers and lenders to look more specifically at deals and more closely at deals. So that's the backdrop of what happened in April, and it was a bottom because it started to immediately recover. Again, these are the reported sales, and we saw that off the lows in April. We recovered in May, down only 39% year over year. And then in June, transactions were down 27% year over year. So overall for the quarter, reported transactions dropped by 39% year over year for the full quarter, which was the largest drop that we've seen since the Great Recession back in 2009, when in the second quarter as well, we saw a 50% drop in reported transactions. So why the rebound? Well, again, according to our survey in early July, by then, 71% of businesses had resumed operations. The federal stimulus was in place, and there was this was encouraging acquisitions. There was just general less uncertainty compared to early April, and there was a specific benefit in the CARES Act around SBA financing. And most importantly, entrepreneurs started seeking opportunity. And we know that entrepreneurs are good at that. And this is a graph that actually shows a bit of that. This is a graph that shows kind of the traffic and leads on the BizBuySell network from the beginning of March through the end of the quarter. So this is a 4-month period, actually. And you can see that around the shelter orders, we saw an immediate drop in traffic and leads as people sheltered and were more focused on what it meant for their businesses and getting squared away. And then it started to recover quite quickly. And actually, by the end of April, we were nearly back to where we were at the beginning of March. And then actually since then, it has exceeded pre-pandemic levels. So there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of buyers out there in the marketplace seeking this opportunity. So why are they so active? Well, we asked them that. We asked specifically, why do you believe now is the right time for you to buy a business? And you could, the buyers in this survey could select multiple reasons here, so it doesn't, that's why it's more than 100% if you add these up. But the number one reason was that 56% of them believe that they may be in the driver's seat and can negotiate a good price right now. But there's also 28% who see an emerging trend or a market opportunity that they want to try to capitalize on. And interestingly, 28% indicated they're newly unemployed and they want to be more in control of their future. And we've seen this before in the last recession where a lot of times people coming out of the corporate America and companies with capital and savings look to be more control of their future and buy a business and operate that business instead of trying to find another job. So we're seeing that again here as well. So we also asked this question of owners, incidentally, and 58% of owners, by the way, were also looking to buy. And a third of those are indicating that the reason that they were looking to buy was to expand locations or to add products and services. So again, a lot of interest in buying both on new owners as well as existing owners. We also asked these buyers like how the pandemic had impacted their timeline to purchase a business. And only 31% said that it had delayed it, while 35% have accelerated their plans. They either weren't planning to buy and now are planning to buy, or they were planning to buy, but they've accelerated their plans. And then a third of them, or 34%, their timeline was unchanged. So you can see in general that these buyers are actually accelerating their plans more than delaying them because of the pandemic. So what are these buyers looking for specifically? Well, they're generally looking for two types of opportunities. There are safe businesses. These are businesses that have been able to weather the pandemic well. They're generating good profits. And by the way, 41% of owners indicated that their business was in this category when we asked owners how they were faring during the pandemic. These are obviously lower risk businesses, will likely cost more because of that, And in general, 2/3 of the buyers we surveyed were looking for this type of opportunity. And we'll obviously cover this in subsequent slides, and David will go into this area as well of opportunity of thriving businesses. The other group was about 1/3 of buyers, and they were looking to get a deal and on a depressed or a closed business. They're basically planning to hold or pivot or turn around and capitalize on the recovery in a business that has been negatively impacted by the pandemic. Often they're looking to acquire prime real estate, locations, equipment, or inventory as part of this acquisition. And again, it was about 1/3 of buyers looking for this kind of opportunity, and 28% of buyers specifically indicated that they were seeking a depressed business just to hold until conditions improve. So with that, here, what are some of the types of businesses that, for those who are looking for stable or growing businesses? Well, there is plenty of opportunity out there. And again, this is for those 2/3 of buyers looking for this type of business. Obviously, it's been well documented in the media that there's a lot of small businesses that have been negatively impacted, significantly hit hard by this pandemic. And a lot of those in general depend on kind of face-to-face interaction. So the hospitality industry and fitness and health and beauty and things like that. But the pandemic, which is causing massive disruption, is also creating new areas of opportunity. And entrepreneurs are the masters at exploiting opportunity. These are just a few of the categories that are thriving during this time on this slide. But in general, essential businesses or anything offering remote service or delivery is doing quite well. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to David, and he's going to kind of pick this topic up and carry forward businesses with upside. David?
Great, thanks, Bob. Yeah, I mean, as you've shared here, there's lots of businesses that are thriving in this environment, and they've not only just demonstrated that they're recession resistant, but in some cases the opportunity can be increased. So I'm going to take a second and just jump into each one of these categories briefly, but I'm starting at the top. Not surprising that financial services and insurance continue to perform for a variety of different reasons, but two that stood out to us were that interest in competent tax advice or strategic tax advice is certainly on the rise. This is likely related to the fact that the CARES Act has created some really unique opportunities that are also quite complex. And then similarly for mortgages, with interest rates now again at historical lows, that industry is starting to take off. Now, alcohol, Guidant actually has some pretty good experience working with companies like Dryfly and Noda Brewery to obtain funding and then serve them ongoing. These businesses can see increased demand in a crisis. At one point, at least per Yelp, wineries and breweries were seeing search, at least on the Yelp platform, search for those types of businesses were up 100% as people were getting ready to hunker down to these stay-at-home orders. And I'll fully admit that I might have played into that statistic as well. You said it a minute ago, the delivery services themselves, this has been imperative for groceries and restaurants, even businesses to continue operating. We all know about the dining apps and how groceries are now leveraging some of those as well. But one of the places that we've seen some spike in demand and performance is within the pack and ship industry. These locations are doing great because they're filling a need for businesses who are no longer or have not been able to go into their physical establishment, including our own. I mean, I've personally visited our local UPS franchise no less than probably 10 times since the pandemic started. But these are doing everything from copies to printing to notaries, shipping, you name it. So really important. With everyone being home, you're seeing a rise in home projects, gardening, repairs. I recently read there was a 245% increase in gardening as an interest for homes and families around the US. But you're seeing appliance repair and plumbing, things of those nature. Those are, you would deem those essential. When those things go down, you absolutely need those. Those don't tend to be as impacted by the external environment, and we're seeing that hold true today. But because people are at home, they're also spending more time with spring cleaning, and so we've seen a significant rise in interest around waste removal, things like Smash My Trash or junk luggers. Now, in terms of animals, the latest reports that I saw said there's a 50% increase in consumer interest for pet adoption. You know, the lockdown's been an opportunity for animal shelters, and they've been certainly urging people to adopt, and it's working. In New York, there's 10 times as many pets being adopted than normal. In Los Angeles, they reported a 70% increase in adoption. So that has created a really great opportunity for those that are in the pet products businesses and even in mobile pet care. And you'll see that as a constant thread here, whether it's packing and shipping or personal services or food and even pet care. Anything that is mobile is doing much better in this environment than those that are just exclusively relying on foot traffic. And then finally, I'll just end with the senior care. It's not surprising that this is continuing to do well, but because of the pandemic, what you're seeing is that families, because they have not been able to spend as much time with their loved ones, they're in some cases having to subscribe to more services. All right, so you talked about this a second ago. I mean, I will just start by saying I've been so impressed by the amount of innovation that entrepreneurs are showing all over the US. I've seen it in franchise systems where a company like Clean Juice, who was typically a made-to-order business, is now shifted to grab and go. They did that in a very quick order. I know of a baby products company who moved to making masks because of the need. And here in Seattle, there's a very, very well-established restaurateur who turned their parking lot into a beach because they knew they had to create unique experiences for people in a socially distant, socially responsible way. And so, they brought in a boatload of sand, turned their parking lot into a beach, and now are doing nighttime movies and dinners. So there's lots of great stories of successes and ways that people are navigating this, but the harsh reality is that businesses all over the US are under significant pressure. Harvard currently is estimating that over 100,000 businesses have already closed. And what this graph is actually telling you is that per McKinsey, they believe that depending on your geography, that the risk of closure is between about 10 and 35%. So it is certainly significant. Now you can see here that in April, Yelp was reporting that just shy of 200,000 businesses had indicated they were closed. And by mid-June, about 17% of them had reopened. Now, the Paycheck Protection Loan, or the PPP as we like to call it, was very helpful for small businesses all over the US. It effectively lengthened the runway. But the longer the pandemic continues, the more pressure is placed on these independent business owners. And so, this is obviously concerning for them and their employees, their communities, and our national economy. But it may represent an opportunity for those of you that are looking to buy a business. And as Bob shared earlier, which I thought was really interesting in the data there, about 55 or 60% of their traffic see this as a really good time for them to buy a business because the valuations may be favorable. Now, we talked about this a second ago, but the businesses that are relying on foot traffic, those have been undoubtedly hit the hardest. So there is great opportunity for buyers to potentially acquire a business with great upside. Now, I do want to be clear that I'm not advocating that anybody take advantage of someone who's struggling today. Certainly never like seeing anyone fail. However, business failures are catastrophic events. So if someone who might otherwise close can transfer their debts and obligations, maybe walk away with some cash, it could be a meaningful reversal for that individual. So I just call this out because there are, as we talked about earlier, many businesses that unfortunately are not going to have the financial wherewithal to continue to push through the pandemic if it lasts much longer. So let's talk about which industries are potentially worth looking at. Let's first, cleaning and sanitation is one that is really starting to take off. Businesses are now trying to reopen. They're having to do so under new standards, and frankly, I think our consumer expectations for cleanliness and sanitation are going to change as well. So I suspect that the demand will skyrocket here. With mobile opportunities, so something like hair care, and then the higher end vanity treatments like laser hair removal and cool sculpting, which those things that can be done in a one-on-one setting versus a group setting like some pedicures or what have you, could be great opportunities. And then with schooling being a major challenge today, tutoring and e-learning is certainly one that is worth considering because the schools struggle to reopen. there's going to be a need to augment education. And frankly, even if some schools reopen, many families won't want to send them there and will look for alternatives. Now, one of the industries that we've been paying a lot of attention to today has been health and fitness, certainly been disrupted in this environment. But what's really fascinating is that per Taboola, they've seen a 2 million% increase in the amount of traffic searching for what they call home integrated fitness. So for those of you that are interested in the health and wellness category, there's great opportunities to turn what used to be traditionally a retail environment into one that is more integrated with home and external facilities. But regardless of where you invest, the financial environment is really, really strong. First, rates are at historical lows. Today, SBA loans are being provided between 5.5% and 6% over 10 years. And then Bob alluded to this earlier, but as part of the stimulus, payments are being made for those that are obtaining SBA financing through September. So there's some really great reasons why someone would consider obtaining financing in this environment. Then I would just note that, again, as we talked about earlier, there could be some real benefit in terms of valuations. And I want to speak briefly to this because, yeah, while there are favorable valuations, the question is, how do you get to that value? Now, for this particular presentation, we're not going to go into the details of all the different methodologies and ways that you would do that, but I would just suggest a couple things. One is, traditionally fair market value is determined between a buyer and seller. And they say, as long as the buyer and seller come to that agreement, neither one of them is under duress, and they all have, good understanding of the relevant facts, that's considered fair market value. So technically, that can be just simply negotiated between the two. I would, however, strongly encourage people to consider getting a certified appraisal before making any big investment, particularly in an environment like today. Now, we've completed thousands of estimated business value reports and certified appraisals for clients, and often see some pretty significant gaps between the initial agreed purchase price and ultimately what the value is deemed. And I think today, in a fast-moving environment where facts and circumstances are changing pretty regularly, that becomes even more important. So my recommendation is that if you are searching for a business to buy, that it be something that the broker, your tax professional or CPA, and your financing company aid you in helping to hone in on the right number, one that the business can support long term. All right, let's talk about financing just a little bit more here, though. Now, we work with buyers every single day to try and help them pre-qualify for financing and then build a strong loan package and locate the right bank where possible address their questions and conditions. Now, the lending environment is hard today. You certainly don't want to passively address financing. You can see here on this chart here, small business lending, this is on the right-hand side, has dropped off significantly since last year. And I'm saying this outside of the PPP. The whole banking system has been distracted appropriately in trying to get capital in the hands of these small businesses through the PPP program. But what is, in terms of traditional lending and SBA financing, it's significantly off where it was. As you can see, compared to last year, the small banks are lending, or I should say, approving about a third of the applications they would per 100, and big banks are off by about 50%. So again, there are dollars available, but it is certainly much harder. In times of uncertainty, banks are always going to tighten up their practices, and lending is available, but again, something that needs to be attacked proactively. So expect it to take longer, and the banks to underwrite at a slower pace with emphasis on certain areas. And the things that we've seen recently, because you're seeing demand start to pick up, banks are now reaching back out saying we'd like to talk to more potential small business loan candidates. The places where they're really digging in are things like credit, where you need to be 680 or higher. The business plan needs to have and account for COVID. This is not something that they're willing to ignore. Obviously, in this environment, that makes a lot of sense. But in particular, with things like restaurants or fitness or hospitality, they are going to want to see direct industry experience. We used to say relevant experience, but today, especially with those categories, they're certainly interested in seeing people that have been in that industry and understand how it operates at a much deeper level. So lots of other things in there. I would just note that equity injection seems to be similar for existing businesses. Somewhere around 20% is what we are still seeing. So you just need to be prepared for that as well. Overall, I would just say simply that they're looking for stronger borrowers today. So if you have a strong financial package and you work with the right financing partner, there is favorable funding available. But I do recommend getting pre-approved sooner rather than later and addressing this proactively, not reactively. All right. The last thing I'll just notice, there are options outside of the banks. If you're interested in buying a business and need less than a couple $100,000, you could potentially secure things like unsecured credit or home equity, which today is dirt cheap. And then there is ROBS, and ROBS is a structure that allows people to buy a business using up to 100% of their retirement funds, but doing it as an investment versus taking a taxable distribution or getting a loan. And so to just quickly illustrate, if you were to buy stock in Microsoft, you would send Microsoft cash to your broker and effectively get to hold shares as collateral for that investment. As they do well, the value of your investment goes well. The same thing is happening here. Through ROBS, your retirement plan is making an investment in your own privately held enterprise, and then your retirement plan becomes a shareholder as a result of that. It's not an investment and not a loan, so there's no payments and no taxes that are due for making it. And it's quick. So in this environment where it's relatively quick moving and cash may be king, these things can be completed in just about three weeks. And what we've seen since the pandemic started is about 84% of our clients are actually leveraging this strategy to buy their business. All right. I know we've covered a lot, and I'm sure that there's some questions. So Bob, maybe we could summarize. Maybe we'll turn it back to you then to summarize why now may be the right time to entertain small business ownership, and then we can just jump into Q&A.
Sure. Thanks, David. Well, yeah, just to wrap it up, and then we'll take your questions. And David, you can feel free to jump in here as well. But this is really a unique and golden opportunity for buyers in many different aspects. David covered kind of the historically low interest rates that are out there. There's this CARES Act program, which is pretty much nearing its end. But loans that do close before September 27th, SBA loans that do close before September 27th will have the first 6 months of principal and interest paid for by the SBA. That's a gift, not a deferral. As we've covered, there's lots of businesses with growth potential. And so look for those businesses that are pivoting or are in categories that are benefiting from these times. There is this opportunity via asset sales to potentially pick up really great locations or inventory equipment, licenses, et cetera, to take forward. And again, we continue to have a lot of business owners. I've heard from a lot of brokers where many business owners are, rather than trying to persevere through this period, are ready to exit. And so there's going to be more supply coming onto the market, and that creates more choice and more opportunity for buyers. So I don't know, David, if you have anything you want to add to that. If not, we can go to questions.
No, I'd say let's go to questions. I think this is a good summary.
Great. Okay, Brendan, do we have any questions?
Oh, Bob, we always have some questions. The first question I want to put to both of you is, in your terms, what's your outlook for the market going forward? And what can buyers look to expect, and how should they go about tackling their next endeavor?
Okay. Let me take a stab, and then David, you want to chime in? Well, I think we're going to continue to see supply come into the marketplace. I think entrepreneurs are going to find that opportunity, and there's still going to be businesses that are trading hands. I think it's going to largely depend on what happens with this virus. You can see that we've started to recover, and that was all based on the country reopening and businesses reopening. And so if we can keep the virus under control and the trajectory moving forward, then I think we'll continue to see stronger recovery, and we'll see more businesses that are performing better, and it should accelerate confidence by lenders, and we should see more deals get done. That's a good big macro view from my view. David?
Yeah, so I'll put a pin on that. I agree wholeheartedly. This is different than 2008, where there was structural issues within our system. This is an event, and if it is handled swiftly and appropriately, I don't suspect that the impacts for small businesses in terms of moving forward from that point in time is going to be as acute. So I agree with what Bob said. I'd love to see a coordinated strategy nationally, because as you look at what's happening across the US, we're seeing very different standards being applied in different ways, and that is going to have an impact because we are so interconnected today. One thing I would say is that for those of you that are buyers in this environment, now is a great time to start getting to understand the landscape and looking at business opportunities that you think are interesting. What I found, Bob, when you showed your chart, or one of your slides, I should say, if I remember correctly, it was somewhere around 2/3 of the people that responded said they were looking for things that had predictable cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember that correctly, then to me that is the individual that wants to buy a small business. And there's plenty of those opportunities available today, those that have proven that they can cash flow and actually not only survive but thrive in this environment. So if that's what you're looking for, that is a different scenario than the other third, which appear to be looking more for great valuations, what I would consider in the stock market world, they call it the bottom fishing strategy, where you're looking for undervalued opportunities that have higher upside potential. Those are just going to be a little bit more risky, and timing those investments is going to be more complicated. So, but I agree that the pandemic is what we should be watching very closely.
Excellent. Thank you for those answers, guys. The next question is related to with sellers and buyers in the transaction time. And folks have wondered about any sort of discounts to multiples. So if the EBITDA multiple before COVID was 6x, are we seeing that it's now 4.5x? Could you both comment on that?
Let me give a quick answer, and then David, you can maybe expound on this. Just from our data set of our insight report, where we do track all this stuff very carefully, and we calculate the medians every quarter. So what we saw in Q2 was that, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the median sale prices and revenues and cash flows actually went up, and that was because the deals that actually got across the goal line and were reported sold tended to be the stronger deals. And so in general, we didn't see any impact to the multiples in Q2 except within one category, and that was restaurants. And that multiple did come down from maybe like two times seller discretionary earnings as a median to maybe 1.8 or something like that. I don't remember the exact number. So there was maybe a 10% drop in that multiple. David, what have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, it's counterintuitive, but in this environment, banks do not want to take risk, and so the deals that they're going to be willing to continue to lend on are going to be stronger in general. So not surprising that when we saw volume shrink significantly over the last quarter, that has gone up. I don't really have any much more to add than what you said.
Okay.
Great. And then I think we'll take just one more question. And right now, there was a couple of folks who inquired about, most important things other than financials that you need to be keeping in mind and understanding if you were looking to buy a business today.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that one. So some of the things that I would be looking at are, one, the health of their vendors to the degree that you can. Many of these businesses are going to rely on other services and other companies in order for them to be able to continue to operate. So I think really important that they're very clear on the health of the people that are serving that business. The other thing is the diversification of their client base. And here in Seattle, a lot of small businesses are dependent on one or two companies like a Amazon or a Microsoft. That's going to create just additional risk if you are subject to very few people. It probably goes without saying, because you said without financials, but I would also very closely look at accounts receivables. And there's a lot of businesses that are performing services today that are having a hard time collecting. So while they're currently booking the revenue, it may not be showing up as cash, and that can be something that's difficult to spot right away.
Great. Well, thank you both. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this as much as we enjoyed putting it together for you. If you could, please take a moment to complete the survey that you'll be prompted when you exit the webinar. And a recording of this webinar will be emailed to you tomorrow morning. Thank you all and have a great day.